It was late September when this happened. I remember because the nights had just started to get cooler, and the streets were always quiet after 10 p.m. I was living alone in a small apartment on the third floor of an old building. I've never been the kind of person to scare easily. I walk home alone at night, I've explored abandoned buildings, and I love horror movies. But what happened to me over those 3 nights? It wasn't a movie. It was real. And I still don't feel safe in my own home. Night 1. I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone. My curtains were open because I liked feeling the breeze from the window. Across the street, there was another apartment building, its windows dark except for one. A faint yellow glow from the second floor. At first, I didn't notice anything strange. But then, my eyes caught movement, like someone standing at the window, staring in my direction. I laughed to myself. Probably just someone looking outside, I thought. But as the minutes passed, they didn't move. No phone in their hand, no sipping from a cup, no adjusting curtains, just standing there, facing my window. It was too far to see their face, but something about the stillness made my skin crawl. I closed my curtains. Night 2. The next evening, I tried to forget about it. But curiosity got the better of me. I peeked through the curtain around 11 p.m. That same window across the street was lit. And this time, the figure was closer to the glass. I could make out more details. A pale face, thin hair, and what looked like a faint smile. I froze, holding my breath. Was it a man? A woman? I couldn't tell. All I knew was they were looking straight at me. I pulled the curtain shut and told myself not to look again. But even as I tried to sleep, I felt a strange pressure, like their eyes were still on me through the walls. Night 3. This was the night that broke me. I stayed up late watching TV, the curtains drawn tight. Around midnight, I went to the kitchen for water. And as I passed the living room window, I stopped. The curtains were slightly open, a gap I didn't remember leaving. Through it, I saw them. Not across the street this time, but standing directly under the streetlight outside my building, head tilted up toward my apartment. My stomach dropped. They weren't moving, just looking up. Their face was still pale, the faint smile still there. Only now I could see their eyes. Wide, unblinking. The knock. I shut the curtains and backed away, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. I grabbed my phone and called my friend Oliver, who lived a few blocks away. Before he could answer, there was a knock at my door. 3 slow knocks. I didn't move. Another 3 knocks. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I whispered into the phone when Oliver picked up, telling him to come over immediately. The knocking stopped. Oliver arrives. When Oliver got there 10 minutes later, we looked outside together. No one was under the streetlight. The window across the street was dark. Probably some creep messing around, Oliver said, trying to sound casual, but I could tell he was uneasy. He stayed the night, and I finally managed to fall asleep around 4 a.m. The photo. The next morning, Oliver shook me awake. Dude, you need to see this. He held out his phone. It was a photo taken from inside my apartment. In it, I was asleep on the couch, and standing behind me in the darkness was that same pale figure, smiling at the camera. I moved out the following week. I still don't know who they were, how they got inside, or how long they'd been watching me. But sometimes late at night, I swear I still feel those eyes on me, waiting for me to look back. I've never been the type to get scared easily. I live alone in a small apartment, and I usually enjoy the peace. But after what happened last winter, I can't even sit in my living room without feeling like there are eyes on me. It started on a cold night in December. I had just come home from work, tired and ready to relax. I made myself some coffee, sat on the couch, and started scrolling through my phone. That's when I felt it, this strange, heavy feeling in the air. Almost like when you're standing in a room and someone else is quietly staring at you. I brushed it off at first. My window was open a little, so maybe it was just the wind making me uneasy. I closed it and went back to my phone. But then, I heard something. A faint tapping sound, like fingernails against glass. It came from the direction of my living room window. Slowly, I turned my head. The curtains were drawn, but I swear I saw the faintest shadow move on the other side. My heart skipped. I stood up, trying to act brave, and pulled the curtain open. Nothing. Just the empty street below, dimly lit by the yellow streetlights. No people, no movement. I told myself I was being paranoid and sat back down. But then the tapping came again. Louder this time. I froze. I didn't even turn to look. I just sat there, holding my breath, listening. The tapping stopped after a few seconds, replaced by a slow scraping sound, like something dragging across the glass. I finally forced myself to look. The curtains swayed slightly, like something had brushed against them from the outside. I live on the 3rd floor. The idea of someone being outside my window was impossible. Wasn't it? I got up and yanked the curtain again. Nothing. Just darkness. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I locked the window and decided to head to bed early. But when I turned off the lights in the living room, I caught something in the reflection of the glass. 2 small glints of light, like eyes, high up near my window. They disappeared as soon as I blinked. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every creak of the building, every distant sound made me tense. At one point, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a faint scratching coming from the living room. I grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly walked toward the sound. My living room was dark, but the streetlight outside gave just enough light to see the outline of the window. My stomach dropped. There was a handprint on the glass. It was small, almost childlike, but it was on the outside. I backed away, too scared to move. I stayed in my bedroom the rest of the night with the door locked. The next morning, I told myself it had to be a prank, maybe kids messing around. I cleaned the glass, trying to forget about it. But the fear didn't go away. A few nights later, it happened again. This time, I was watching TV when I caught a movement in my peripheral vision. Something darting past my window. My heart was pounding. I slowly muted the TV, and that's when I heard it, breathing. Shaky, shallow breathing. Right outside my window. I was too scared to look directly, so I turned my head slowly, pretending to be casual. That's when I saw it, just for a split second. A pale face, pressed against the glass. The eyes were wide open, unblinking, and the mouth was twisted into a grin that didn't look human. I jumped up, yanked the curtains closed, and called the police. When they arrived, they searched the area but found no one. They said it was probably my imagination. But they couldn't explain the small, dirty footprints they found on the narrow ledge outside my 3rd floor window. The police left, but I couldn't relax. That night, I decided to sleep in my bedroom with the door locked again. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my living room window sliding open. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering into it. As I spoke, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps in the living room. They stopped right outside my bedroom door. Then, silence. A soft tapping started against my door. Not knocking, tapping like fingernails. The dispatcher told me officers were on their way, but the tapping stopped before they arrived. When the police came in, they found my living room window wide open. The cold night air was pouring in, and on the floor, there was a small scrap of fabric, old, faded, and smelling like dirt. They told me it might be someone living in the abandoned building across the street. I moved out 2 weeks later. Even now, I sometimes wake up at night and feel like I'm being watched. And sometimes, I see that same pale face in my dreams, pressed against the glass. I don't usually believe in strange things. I'm the type of person who needs proof before I believe anything. But what happened to me 2 years ago still haunts me every single day. Even now, I can't go to sleep without checking my windows. Twice. It was the middle of winter. I lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. The building was old, with thin walls and squeaky floors. My window faced a quiet alley that hardly anyone ever used. I liked it that way. Fewer people passing by meant more privacy. Or so I thought. That night, I had stayed up late working on my laptop. It was around 1:30 a.m., and the world outside felt silent and frozen. I remember making myself a cup of coffee even though it was too late for caffeine. I just wanted something warm. As I walked past my window, I noticed something strange, a shape. At first, I thought my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. But then I realized there was a man standing in the alley, right across from my window. He wasn't moving. He wasn't even shifting his weight. He was just standing there, watching. I froze. My mind instantly tried to explain it away. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was just some drunk guy trying to get his bearings. But something about him felt wrong. His posture was stiff, his head slightly tilted, and though I couldn't see his face clearly, I knew his eyes were locked on me. I backed away from the window and turned off the light, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. From the darkness of my room, I peeked through the blinds. He was still there. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. 15. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? There's a man outside my window, but he's not doing anything illegal? I tried to convince myself he'd eventually walk away. But he didn't. Around 2 a.m., I decided to be brave. I grabbed my phone and went to the kitchen, which had another small window facing a different part of the alley. If I could see him from another angle, maybe I could get a better look. I kept my lights off and crept forward. When I reached the window, I nearly dropped my phone. He had moved. He was now standing closer, about 10 feet from my building. He was still facing my apartment. His head was tilted more, like he was trying to listen. I couldn't see his face because of the shadows, but the way he stood there felt deliberate. Like he knew I was watching from behind the blinds. Something in my gut told me to hide. I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and locked it. I lay in bed with my phone clutched to my chest, too scared to move. I must have dozed off at some point, because the next thing I remember is waking up to a sound. Tap, tap, tap. My eyes flew open. The sound was coming from my window. I froze, every muscle in my body tense. Slowly, I turned my head toward the blinds. I couldn't see anything, but the tapping came again. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was slow, like someone wanted to remind me they were there. I finally gathered enough courage to crawl out of bed. My heart was racing so fast it hurt. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a metal lamp, and tiptoed toward the window. When I reached the blinds, I took a deep breath and pulled them up. No one was there. I almost laughed from relief. My mind started to play the rational game again. Maybe it was a tree branch hitting the glass. But then I remembered. There were no trees near my window. The next morning, I told myself I had overreacted. I even felt a little silly. But when I left for work, I decided to check the alley just to ease my mind. That's when I saw them. Footprints. They were deep in the snow, leading right up to my window. And not just to my window, they stayed there. The snow was disturbed in one spot, as if someone had stood there for hours. Worse, I noticed something else. On the outside of the glass, faint but clear, were 3 long streaks. Finger streaks. As if someone had pressed their hand against my window and dragged their fingers down. That night, I made sure every door and window was locked. I even pushed my couch in front of the window, just in case. Still, I couldn't sleep. I kept listening for noises, convinced I'd hear that tapping again. At 3:12 a.m., I heard it. But this time, it wasn't at my window. It was at my front door. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The tapping came again, followed by a slow, quiet scraping sound, like metal sliding against wood. My door handle. Someone was trying to turn it. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone was at my door. She told me to stay on the line and hide until the police arrived. The tapping stopped. Then, silence. When the police finally arrived, they found nothing. No footprints, no sign of forced entry. They told me it was probably a prank or some random drunk, but their tone suggested they didn't believe me. I could tell by the way they exchanged glances. But I knew what I saw, and I knew it wasn't over. Over the next week, I started noticing little things. The feeling of being watched when I walked home from work. The sense that someone was just out of my sight. Sometimes I would catch movement in the corner of my eye, but when I turned, there was no one there. Then, one night, I woke up to find my blinds open. I never leave my blinds open. That was the final straw. I broke my lease and moved out the following month. I don't know if the man from the alley ever followed me. I don't know if he's still watching me now. But I've learned one thing. You don't always see who's watching you. Sometimes, they're patient. Sometimes, they're just waiting for the right moment to step out of the shadows. And sometimes, they never step out at all.